All right, guys, I'm here with Graem from CrossFit Perfectus. Perfectus, that's correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so he's my coach for CrossFit. I used to race professional triathlon, and I became a dad, and that changed quite a bit, a little of the things, because it's so hard to go out for hours when you have a kid. And in my case, I have a special need kids that needs me a lot more than most dads. And CrossFit, it's good because it's intense. I can come in, do 1 hour, work my full body, and get home. So I'm here to talk to, and the reason I wanted to talk to this guy is because one thing I noticed that is different on their gym is they're really focused on form and like the technique and stuff like that. Something that I didn't see in other gyms that I went to. So that's why I was very interested in talking to him, because I think that's one of the most important things in fitness and CrossFit. And you can tell me if I'm wrong later. CrossFit sometimes have a bad reputation on injury, but I think it's a lot because of the coaching. I've been to several CrossFit gyms where people weren't paying attention to me, and I was doing heavy weights. And here I've realized that it's completely different. Right. But I will let him talk. So if you can introduce yourself a little bit and maybe say how long you've been in CrossFit and all that.
So my name is Graem. I'm a native of Colorado. Been in the fitness industry for about 12 years now. CrossFit was something that I actually stumbled upon not very long ago. I've only been a CrossFit coach for about 5 years and doing CrossFit for about 5 years. But when I first started out in the industry, I was kind of into the whole bodybuilding trend and wanted big muscles and aesthetics and all that fun stuff. So during high school and college, played some sports, and then after that, kind of just ventured into the whole 24-hour fitness kind of routine, where doing certain muscle groups and spending 3-4 hours at the gym and wasting a lot of time. So so that's kind of where I started. And then I got into corporate wellness, where I was a head trainer and a fitness instructor and a CPR instructor. And I did that for about 8 years, personal trainer, group exercise instructor, and all that. So, for me, it was all about building some experience in working with different populations. I've had blind clients.
Blind clients?
Blind clients,
really?
Yeah. I've worked with different genders. I've worked with different ages. I've worked with different cultural backgrounds, etc. So what I try to do over the last 8 years is just build a platform to be well versed in every area that I could train in. So fast forward 8 years in corporate wellness, kind of got sick of that, seeing the same thing over and over and over again, kind of a Groundhog Day routine where people were kind of coming in and just doing the same thing over and over and over again. It was the same routines.
Not getting a whole lot of results.
Right, and I mean, maybe, initially they do, and that's the thing about fitness is, there's such a big upslope when you first start, regardless of where you're starting at, depending on what program you're in. But, I felt like I was kind of guiding these people, and that after a period of time, they just weren't listening to the guidance anymore. So, after 8 years of corporate wellness, I ventured out and decided to open up my own CrossFit gym. And prior to opening up the CrossFit gym, I was CrossFitting for about 6 months at a local gym in the area, building some more experience. I did an apprenticeship program where I was working under some pretty elite head coaches and still refining my skills. So 12 years later, the gym has been open for 5 years now. We have a really good population, a good demographic here, and that's kind of where we've blossomed from there.
So with your experience, what you would say is the main difference between CrossFit and regular fitness in that sense?
Well, variety and structure. I would say they're the two critical components there. A lot of people, like I said, when I was working at corporate wellness, it was just the same routines, people doing the same thing over again and complaining about why they weren't getting results. When you come to CrossFit, everything's varied. Every day it's varied. Every warm-up is varied. Every strength component is varied, and you're working full body movements, incorporating different aspects of fitness. So I would say that variation was a big key, and then just getting people into a group setting where there was safe and instructive coaching. like you said, there were a lot of times where people go into the gym and they don't really have that resource. They don't have the money to pay for a trainer. They don't have somebody watching them while they're working out. So that guidance is a missed piece. People just don't have that structure and guidance, and that's where injury can occur. That's where burnout can occur, and that's where lack of results occur. So with here at CrossFit, especially at Profectus, we're all about safety and and a fun environment, making sure that form is always present to load, and that people are coming in here and they're getting coached one-on-one, they're getting their money's worth.
Now, well, you already asked some of my questions of the benefit of CrossFit, and one thing I noticed that you guys do that I didn't notice in other gyms, CrossFit gyms, is that you always do a strength session before, correct? Correct. Is that something that you created, or it's...
So it's funny.
What's the deal?
It's funny you say that, because when I went into my level 2 certification for CrossFit, they never really talked about that in level 1, necessarily about the programming. It was more about, here's the movements, let's focus on the efficiency of the movement, let's focus on form and technique. And then when I got into my level 2, they started dialing into programming, and they were like, hey, we're not big fans of doing strength and WODs every single day. What I've noticed through experience is that most people want both components of that. Some people come in here and they want to do strength only. Some people come in here, they want to do strength and WODs. Some people want to do just Metcons, where they're just breathing hard and breathing heavy for 20 minutes. Through my years of experience, what I've noticed with my clientele is that the best results come from incorporating both. Do we do a strength and a Metcon or a WOD every single day? Not necessarily, but yeah, I think strength is a major component in injury prevention. And I also think it's a major component in building endurance and stamina for moving long and long periods of time. Yeah. So,
well, I noticed a big difference with coming in here, and even though I had a background of endurance, this is all pretty much new for me, and right. To be honest, that's the longest I stick with a CrossFit gym ever.
That's awesome. Because
the other ones, I knew that I was doing the movement wrong, but I didn't know what was wrong, and so I just feel like that's not working for me. So.
Right, and for us too, we look at things from a scientific background. How are people adapting? Are people having reoccurrences of injuries? Are we all having the same types of injuries? Are we working all metabolic pathways? Are we working, fat oxidation? Are we working anaerobic? Are we working aerobic? So anaerobic would be short bursts of strength. Aerobic would be longer distance and durations. So we really had to dive into it from a textbook standpoint to make sure that we were hitting all the aspects for what our clients needed and what they still need, because you continue to refine that. Yeah. So every week's going to be a little bit different based off of how your population is responding and adapting.
Now, I'm about to have my first CrossFit competition.
Oh, yeah.
I really don't know what to expect from that. The only thing I know is I'm going to be pretty sore, just like Correct. I did on Ironmans and stuff. But the question is, do you still compete?
I compete a little bit. For me, I'm almost 36 now, and I definitely don't want to put an age on it at all by any means, but as you do get a little bit older, recovery does take a little bit longer. Intensity of workouts need to be scaled appropriately depending on the day. So for me, I compete. I try to do 2 or 3 competitions a year. For me, it's fun now.
It's fun,
and I approach it from a non-competitive standpoint, even though I am competitive, because I still want CrossFit to be fun. At the end of the day, if I'm so stressed out about it, I'm not going to have fun, and then that leads me to wanting to do something else. So I want to make sure that CrossFit is something that I enjoy as a hobby, still maintain some sort of competitiveness, but as far as competing, a couple a year, if a friend of mine or whatever, or local, somebody from the gym, they've never done one, and I'll hop in with them and do their first competition with them. For me, I do it for others more than I do it for myself now.
So you like to compete on the group type of setting?
Yeah, the group setting.
Because you can compete solo and you can compete on a group, right?
Correct.
Or in couples, just like we're doing.
Correct. You can do teams of 3, you can do teams of 4, depending on whatever the competition is. I like to work with groups of people. That's kind of your daily CrossFit class, right, where you're working out with 4, 5, 6, 10, 15 people. For me to go in there individually and try to do that solo, those competitions are really hard. Yeah. They are really taxing, and it takes my body a long time to recover. So if I pair up with somebody or pair up with a team of 3 or 4 or 5 other people, it kind of reduces the load and the stress on my body, and then I can recover a little bit faster so that it doesn't take me down for a couple weeks at a time.
So it's funny because you mentioned 2 things that I like to talk in my program a lot. It's one, it's fun, and second, it's the fact that you can get burned out. So and age too, because people don't realize, like I see it all the time, people had that midlife crisis or something, then they try to go work out like crazy, and they don't realize that sometimes, like, the older you get, the less you have to do. Right. And in order to remain healthy and prevent injury and stuff like that.
Less is more in quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Less is more in quality over quantity. That's what I really stress. And regardless of your age, I feel that falls true for most people. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, if you're so injured or if you're so sore, you won't be able to work at your maximal effort or whatever you perceive that to be. And then at that time, then we start to see some injuries and some other stuff happen as well.
So what is your tip for people that want to start it out on that, or even if they think they're too old to start, what would you suggest for this kind of?
So ironically, you say that about the midlife crisis. I just read an article actually that
I think you posted that, right?
Yeah, I posted on Facebook, and it said that CrossFit is now the new midlife crisis, right? Extreme sports are now the midlife crisis, where people are turning away from their average gym. I'm not trying to say anything bad about any other gyms, but they're turning away and trying to go for something else. Kind of that grass is greener on the other side type of mentality. They want more intensity, they want more structure, they want more coaching. And I think media has done that too, where they've really put that into a spotlight. And people are starting to see more and more of the benefits of actually having a coach and being instructed on how to stretch properly and how to move properly and how to master movements, because then you get all those coupled together and you're a pretty well-rounded athlete without having to be a competitive athlete at all. So, so burnout is another one of those where people, my advice on that is don't go too hard, too fast, too soon. Okay. So when people first start CrossFit, I love their enthusiasm, I love their attitude and their dedication to it. But if you're coming 5-6 days a week, CrossFit isn't necessarily meant to be done 5 or 6 days a week, unless you're scaling it appropriately, unless you're adapting to certain workouts based off of how your body feels. But the unfortunate part is sometimes when people with a competitive edge, they'll come into CrossFit and they can't hold back. They got to give 110%, and then that's where we start seeing issues there too. So. Don't go too hard, too fast, too soon. And that's probably one of the biggest pieces that I've told my clients is start slow, and every little step is a baby step. Because I feel like CrossFit is a journey of fitness. Yeah. It's not just something that's a short travel.
It's a lifestyle more than anything else.
It is a lifestyle, and this is something that you want to do for a long period of time. It's functional fitness, and it's appropriate for any age level. It's appropriate for any gender. It's appropriate for even adaptive athletes. We've been seeing a lot more adaptive athletes coming into CrossFit and really understanding the benefit of it, and also getting that support with the community, saying, I know I may have some limitations, but I know that this community is here to support me. And at the end of the day, that's all people want, is they just want a little bit of love. Yeah.
That's true. And it's funny you mentioned the going 100%. It feels like humans have a very hard time of like backing off. I don't know if it's an ego thing or not, but like backing off, saying like, listen, and I'm guilty, because like the first time I went to a CrossFit gym, I was like, listen, I can do Ironmans in like 9 hours, so I should be able to do this. And like my first wood, I was like, okay, I gotta back off a little bit. Right. But I had that mentality, and a lot of people don't have, and that's and one thing you mentioned too, I think having a coach, it's people think that having a coach is or either a bad thing, or they assume that coach have to be better than you, but it's not. Being coachable, I think it's one of the best things that you can learn how to be, because that's when you learn for somebody that had that experience before. It doesn't mean necessarily that he's better than you, but
some of your worst coaches are your worst athletic coaches are your best coaches.
Exactly.
Some
yeah.
of your most athletic coaches are your
worst coaches, yeah.
Right? You know, because sometimes they learn things better themselves, but they can't reiterate that to somebody else. Yeah. I think being a role model as a coach is very important. I think, you know, for somebody coming in new, fresh to CrossFit, they shouldn't see an overweight, out of shape coach.
Yes,
you know,
I totally agree on that.
I just don't think that leads to a good example, because they're like, at the end of the day, they're going to be like, well, if coach does that, then I can do that.
Yeah.
Also, piggybacking off of not being able to hold back or pushing too hard, too fast, too soon, I think there's two aspects to that. Accountability by the athlete to reduce some of that ego and be humble. Exactly. And then accountability on the coach to say, I think you need to back off a little bit. Okay, so there's two sides to that: accountability by the athlete and accountability by the coach. A coach should always, I was told this a long time ago, a coach should never have to cue somebody 3 or 4 or 5 times to do it correctly. They should only have to cue them once, and if they don't change it, they need to go over there and correct that to change it. Okay, so just words, cues, all that, it only goes so far. And actually making a difference in somebody's life, you have to go over there and tell them, wait a second, and hold back, and then tell them why. I think a lot of people want to know why, because they're going to question you right away.
Yes, yeah.
And they want to know the why, and so we give them the why. Efficiency, lack of injury, mastering movements before worrying about, you know, loads, things that I've talked about earlier in this cast. So.
Yeah, that's one thing I learned on the hard way with triathlon. I was always trying to, you know, first of all, I was always trying to beat whoever was like next to me, even on training. Then I realized, like, first of all, I need to beat myself.
Right.
You know, like, so I only were able to break 10 hours when I put my ego on the side pretty much. Right. And said, like, you know what, training's training. I need to go easier, and in competition I go harder and stuff like that. Right. So
well, and there's a difference between daily workouts and training for competitions.
Yes.
You know, the intensity level is going to be different, the frequency is going to be different. You know, so for us, when we say training, that's just us working on our fitness every single day.
Yeah.
Training is somebody who's specifically training for something, and there's has to be, not to say that there has to be a better structure, but there has to be more sport specific stuff within their training, because they're only solely doing that sport. With CrossFit, we're notorious for being multidimensional athletes, so we can do pretty much everything and anything. Can we be super awesome at everything and anything? No, not always. But if you told me to run a 5K today, could I do it? Yeah. Is it going to be fast? Probably not. Is it going?
Well, it depends on what you're
right.
comparing to. You
right.
know,
is it going to hurt a little bit? Sure. You know, but I can do it. So that's the whole component behind that, is learning to push and learning to pull and learning yourself. And I think you brought up a good point about being competitive with yourself and only worrying about you. And I think that's the greatest component about Profectus in general, CrossFit Profectus, is that we tell people to come in here and put your blinders on. Don't be somebody else's best, be your best for that day. So that's what we really try to stress with our athletes. It's not about who's RXing, it's not about who's lifting the heaviest weight, it's not about who's running the fastest mile, and we're definitely not peeking up at the whiteboard. Now, on the other end of that, I do enjoy friendly competition. I really enjoy our athletes in this gym getting after each other in a fun and effective manner. And I think most of, if not all of our athletes are down with that. They're all on the same page as far as that goes.
It's funny because one day I came here and then we were doing a time trial type of workout. I don't remember what was the workout, but I had less weight because, you know, like, lifting weight was never my forte.
Right.
So I finished and I said, like, well, I finished pretty fast, and I said, like, well, but I had pussy weight. And then one of your athletes corrected me, like, listen, there is no pussy weight. I mean, you're doing the movement, you're doing the stuff, and you're going at what you can go. Right. So that means, and I was like, that's, you know, like, I had the mentality before, but, you know, it's different when you hear from somebody else.
Right.
You know,
athletes, they need to understand that scaling is an adaptive purpose. That scaling isn't showing that you're weaker.
Yeah.
You know, that it's a point for the athlete to adapt to a certain stimulus. And then by scaling, we can maybe eventually get to an RX, a prescribed weight, or a prescribed movement, or get our first pull up, or get our first toes to bar, or something like handstand push up. A lot of gymnastics that people struggle with, but, you know, it's scaling should not be considered pussy weight, or, you know, it's modifying.
It's modifying what you can do.
Right.
Yeah.
It's modifying to create a greater stimulus, but less of a stimulus than it would be for somebody who's going way above and beyond or going RX, right?
Yeah.
So once again, that's accountability on both the coach and the athlete to understand. We have a lot of athletes in our gym that'll still come up to me 4 or 5 years later in the gym and say, where do you think I should be at with this weight today? How fast do you think I should go on this? How should I break this up? And that's just that makes me feel good. Because I feel like they've entrusted me now.
Yeah.
They've put their trust in me to guide them in the right direction. And it's all about linear progression. Is it going to happen over a period of 1 night or 2 nights? No, it's going to happen over a period of 1 to 2 years.
That's the thing. Like a lot of people nowadays they're wanting a quick fix,
Right.
and that shit doesn't happen.
No, it
like
doesn't.
quick fix. There's no quick fix.
Yep.
Now, with the midlife crisis, I just want to point it out because if you look at the age groups between 35 to 45 in running, ultramarathons, triathlon, they're the most competitive ones.
Right.
And it's incredible because I don't know what it is, but sometimes I feel like people, they start way too early, like working super hard to make money, and when they hit that age, they're like, I gotta do something with my life, and then they ended up going to.
They need to find something that's enjoyable.
Yeah. So.
And I think the community aspect of CrossFit really helps with that. Is it easy to come in here every single day and put your 100% effort and feel like you're making progress every single day and hitting PRs all the time? No, that's not realistic. But on those down days where you feel like you don't have the energy, I don't want to be here, I didn't sleep last night, my kids kept me up, my dogs kept me awake, the thunder was bad last night, you have some people in here that are like, pick it up.
Yeah.
Be positive, and I think that helps rearrange people's thinking a little bit. So.
Yeah, I think what I like about CrossFit, it's the community aspect that like everybody. It's like skateboarding. One thing I noticed to triathlon, it's some of the triathletes are really selfish, and then they can give a shit about you because like you ended up spending hours by yourself training and stuff like that because it's an individual sport.
Right.
Even though CrossFit, it's a lot of individual stuff, but when you come to the gym, like I feel like it's even different from a regular gym because people are like more open, they kind of push you, and it's especially here, like I don't know if maybe it's a Colorado thing or but like people were like super nice when I came here, and they're always trying to help each other. And
that was one thing that when I was going to my regular recreational gym years and years ago was that I could see the same guy checking me in every single day at the front desk, and he had no idea who I was. He couldn't remember my name. He forgot who I was. He didn't even know if he saw me yesterday. Yeah. There's just that doesn't feel good to me. And then I'd go in and I'd work out and I'd see the same people, 4, 5, 6, 7 people, and they wouldn't even say hi. They wouldn't crack a smile. It's very isolated in those situations, and I feel like you have to kind of open up your book when you come into CrossFit and be a little bit more open to people knowing more about you and having conversations with people that you normally wouldn't conversate with, and hanging out and doing events with people you're like, I'd never hang out with that person, and then you finally get to meet them, you're like, man, we've been long lost friends for a long time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it opens up everyone's book and makes people a little bit more vulnerable to express themselves, but I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing.
No, and I think like when it comes to health, it's very important to have that environment,
right?
Because otherwise you're gonna go to the gym and you're gonna do your thing, and it's gonna be boring, and you're gonna end up like quitting a little bit later. And the crazy thing is, I was reading one time about marketing, and that's how like big gyms make money. Like come at the beginning of the year, they sign up people for like $30, and people are just they feel bad about canceling, and they keep paying for the rest of their lives, not even going in there because it's boring, and
and they'll continue to pay because there's always that. Well, what if I go?
What if one day I feel like going?
Next week we're starting a new journey.
Exactly.
And not to knock any of those other gyms, but those gyms are those commercial gyms, which are different than corporate gyms, by the way. Commercial gyms are based off of they want you to come in and pay that significant price and never see you again.
Yeah.
Because you're that generating revenue that they don't have to worry about. You don't come in the doors. You don't wreck their equipment. You don't overuse their equipment.
They don't use it.
You don't hurt yourself in their gym and create issues that way. That's a perfect example for them.
Yeah, that's perfect for them.
Now, I will tell you this. Obviously I own a CrossFit gym, but I'm not opposed to people doing other gyms. I'm not opposed to people doing the Orange Theories and opposed to people doing hot yoga and the core powers and stuff like that. I think on top of CrossFit, you need to also implement other things as part of your lifestyle. And maybe it is going to yoga once a week, or maybe it is just going to hit some biceps and chest and making yourself feel good at the 24-hour fitness a couple of days a week. Whatever that may be, just as long as you're fitting. I think that's the end goal.
Exactly.
But with the difference here with CrossFit is that you're going to be fitting under guidance. You know, you're always going to have supervision of a coach. You're always going to have a resource to bounce back off of, either that be the community or the other coaches. So we allow more resources for our athletes, nutritional-wise, conditioning-wise, weightlifting-wise.
Yeah.
We provide a lot more services and resources that necessarily don't come at a fee.
Yeah.
So it's just it's just talking and conversations that create these platforms.
Yeah, what I like about CrossFit is that because you work like strength, you work mobility, endurance, and all that, which is something that you don't get in like regular gyms by yourself. And you can go out for a gym and just like pump the iron a lot, but you're gonna see those people with like really skinny legs and big upper body, or the opposite with the ladies, like huge legs with like a not so
just a weak upper body.
Upper body. So it like you need to balance out. And just like you said, like that's one thing I do. I try to come here 3 times a week, and then I do my other stuff. Like, of course, I got burned out from triathlon, from racing professionally for too long, and then now my cardio is my skateboarding, pretty much.
Well, right.
So I try to mix it up.
You've turned a competitive sport into a hobby now, where you went from triathlons to now being a skateboarder, and that's what you've done your whole life. And now that's your hobby. You know, and when people do competitive sports for their whole life, it turns into a job more than a fun or hobby. And that was one thing that I didn't want to do. Opening up a CrossFit gym, I said, I want to be a gym owner. I want to own a gym. I want to have a great membership base. I want to have a lot of cool athletes and all that, which I think I've hit all those aspects now, but I don't want to get burned out.
Well, I was actually impressed because the other day you jumped in the wood and you were having like a whole lot of fun.
Right.
And like right now, like for example, if I look at a triathlon workout, I don't even if it's cycling with a group or something, I don't even can imagine myself jumping in there and having fun.
Right.
Rather before, in the beginning it was, but
Right.
I was impressed because you work with this, you see
Right.
CrossFit, like you breathe CrossFit,
Right.
and you jumped in and you were having like a whole lot of fun just like us. So that was pretty.
This is what I want to do, and nobody told me that I had to do it. You know, and that was one key component, is that nobody ever tells you, you don't have to choose what somebody else wants you to do as far as your fitness journey goes. You know, you could only do yoga, you could only do CrossFit, you could do nothing at all. You could only hike, you could only snowboard, you could only ride skateboards, you know, and if that's what you want to do, that was your choice. So when people come in and they complain about workouts and they complain about, I'm like, nobody told you had to do this.
Exactly.
You know, and don't, like I told you before, don't get me wrong, every day is a little different. And is my energy and attitude and positivity always there? No, it's not, you know, because I'm human. But this is still, at the end of the day, I chose to do this.
Exactly.
So that's why I'm doing it.
That's like a big thing because I coach several athletes for Ironman and stuff, and then sometimes they go like, why do I have to swim 4,000 yards? I'm like, listen, you sign up for the thing.
Right.
You know, like you pay $600 to get into the Ironman, not me.
Right.
So I'm just making sure that you finish with dignity, you know, like not dragging yourself down to the finish line, and you have fun.
Right.
But it's your choice from signing up. So that's a very good point.
It is.
That a lot of people complain about fitness and stuff like that, and that's definitely a very important point.
You know, because a lot of the times you don't really hear very many people complaining about why they don't fitness.
Yeah.
You never hear that. Yeah. Man, you know, and it's like, just some of that can come off as, you know, people just making excuses. Man, I just need to get into the gym. It's been way too long. It's just, and they keep continuing with that excuse. It's getting into the door is the major component here at CrossFit. Is there's just so much bad press out there about, you know, we had talked earlier about the negative. You know, there's 99 positives and there's one negative. Everyone's going to talk about that one negative. So
they focus on the negative.
They focus on the negative. So I feel like, you know, lately, you know, as of the last 4 or 5 years, CrossFit has been getting a lot more of a positive press, just because a lot more research is coming out about, hey, this is kind of one of the most ideal programs that you can be a part of as far as safety and effectiveness.
Actually, the course that I did, the health course that I did, they actually say exactly that. Like, listen, for strength, you don't need a whole lot. You need to mix it up with sprinting and things like that. And it's exactly where CrossFit fit in, like, because it's just like, it works you, like you said, it's never the same thing, and that makes a lot more fun.
And who can who can go to any other gym besides a CrossFit gym, get a full complete warm-up, a full strength session, a full workout, a full cool down, work on mobility, coordination, agility, and do that all in 1 hour.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
And it doesn't happen very often. And do that all under guidance.
Yeah.
Right? And a coach telling you, back off.
Put in
speed
more,
up,
yeah.
Put in more.
Motivating you.
Right,
and,
motivating you, so there's a lot of that happens in the CrossFit community too.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I, like, as a parent now, and like you said, I'm not professionally anymore. It really helps me because, like, I know if I hit 2 to 3 times a week, like, it's good for health-wise, and I feel good about it. I'm not like torn down the next day that I cannot move. So it's a whole different story.
Right. Weight training is essential for aging populations, especially in females. Hormones and menopause and weight bearing, as we age, osteoporosis and bone density gets weaker. So that's why you see the 90-year-old who never weightlifted, really they fall off of a 2-foot stool
and then
they shatter their hip, and then they're dead a week later because their body can't manage that infection or whatever else. So, and
if they have like anesthesia, that makes it worse. That happened with my grandmother. She never worked. I mean, she worked out when she was young, but later on in life she fell off. She broke her hip, and her Alzheimer's just kick off after the anesthesia.
Right. Because
like the body can't handle that stuff anymore. Right. So
research shows that after the age of 25, everyone loses a half a pound of muscle every year without weight-bearing exercises or weight training in general. A half a pound of muscle every year.
That's a lot of muscle.
That's a lot of muscle. And strength is really hard to build. You build strength over a period of your lifetime. You don't just build it over a period of a year and you're like, hey, I'm going to stop weight training and I'm going to maintain those gains.
Exactly.
No, because those gains, what you just did over a year, you could essentially lose that in 3 or 4 months.
Which is different than endurance. Like endurance, sometimes it's a little easier to keep it going versus strength. That's why you see sometimes older people rocking like really good marathon times and even like ultra marathon times, because it doesn't degrade yourself so much like strength does. Strength, you can lose it in a second,
right?
Like it's
exactly,
which is tough,
right? And then getting back to females in general too, with weight training. I mean, menopause and hormones can screw up everything, right?
Yeah.
Physically and mentally. So I think the weight training aspect not only prepares you physically, but I think a lot of that stuff helps you mentally. And breaking barriers and going through tough workouts in a CrossFit setting and then dealing with life outside of here, it makes things feel a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Like your approach on life is a little bit more positive. It's a little bit better because why? You're feeling better about yourself. Yeah. You've built more confidence in yourself.
Oh, it's just like you said, nobody complains that the workout that they never done it.
Right.
Because like we were meant to move, and then whenever you move, and whatever, I usually say like just do any movement that you like. Right. It can be CrossFit, going biking, whatever. But whenever you do exercise, it's really hard to not feel good about it. You know what I mean? Like, because we were meant to move.
Right. The endorphins get flowing, that feel good. Yeah. That they call that the runner's high, when the runners catch their second wind and they're just in a zone. And I've been. CrossFit's a little different, as far as like, have I been in a zone before? I don't know necessarily. I've been definitely out of my zone. But CrossFit's, it's one of those things that's so humbling that it just keeps kind of this small little intrigue that kind of keeps you coming back for a little bit more and keeps you coming back for a little bit more.
And being humble, it's actually very good thing. I remember the first time I went to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, my professor, which was like a long time family friend, he put me to row with this girl that was a purple belt. And then I was like, she's a girl, like, man, she kicked my ass like so much, because I was like, okay, I got to be a little bit more humble, like I got to, and that's and I think CrossFit does that too. Right.
And but unfortunately, I think there's still some people out there that have a really hard time adapting to being humble. So they'll come into CrossFit and they'll see the benefits of it, but they almost kind of want to resist the benefit of it just to kind of keep feeding that mentality.
Exactly, yeah.
So you kind of run into that issue occasionally too, but for the most part, if you're humble enough, you come in here, you're gonna almost relearn how to be fit again, and then the progress just keeps coming.
Now, one thing I think it's really worth to talk about, because especially part of my audience know me from triathlon and stuff like that. When I started because I skateboard as a little, and like I cracked my helmet one day and then I stopped when I was like about 18, and now I came back again. But what I noticed is CrossFit really does help with my skateboarding. And when I did as a triathlete as well, because I did for a while when I was training for triathlon, I noticed a big difference when I went biking and all that, because it's almost like I could reduce my workload on swim, bike, and run because I was gaining so much. So what is your opinion on when it comes to CrossFit and to benefit other sports and things like that? And
well, I just think it's like I told you before, it's the 10 physical traits that CrossFit always stresses. It's endurance, it's stamina, strength, speed, agility, coordination, flexibility, accuracy, and precision. So like I told you before, that multidimensional athlete, we don't necessarily have to be sport specific, and a lot of research has been coming out and has been out for a long time that being sport specific doesn't make you necessarily better at that sport. You don't need to necessarily, like being a triathlete, you don't need to necessarily just run, bike, and swim and that's all you ever do. If you incorporated some other things into your program, you'd probably be a better triathlete.
So
without training specifically for it.
Talking about that, so let's see what is your suggestion for somebody that, for example, there's training for an Ironman or an ultramarathon? What would you suggest to incorporate in their, how many times and things like that?
That's going to be a broad question because everyone's going to be doing a little bit different of an event, right? So it depends on the duration of the event. It depends on the type of event that person's doing. But in general, what we do is we see what that person's really involved with, and then we try to adapt a program that's based off of what they're doing specific to their sport. Because at that point in time, they've made that sport a priority over CrossFit. CrossFit's just going to be the byproduct of what they do in their sport. So what we try to do is we look at every athlete individually. And the funny thing is when people look at CrossFit, they're like, how do you get 20 people in one class doing the same thing, trying to all benefit from a different thing? Does that make sense? Like everyone comes in here with different goals, and we're all doing the same thing. So how do you adapt to their goals? And we talk to each individual athlete. We say, where are you going with this? What's the purpose of training? And that's always been a key component for me as a coach, is saying if you don't come in here with a purpose or an idea of why you're here, you're probably not going to be successful at what you're doing. Okay, so getting back to your question, I'd probably have to look at that athlete individually. Individually, yeah. And a lot of it's going to be, especially if it's a profession, if it's a professional sport that they play, they're going to have to do more of that sport, a little bit more sport specific. But it doesn't mean that they can't implement CrossFit twice a week or even 3 times a week and just reduce the intensity or reduce the loads or whatever that training adaptation may be. Maybe they're training for volume, so they need the higher volume, the higher reps and the less weight. Maybe they're training for strength. Maybe they're in the luge in the Olympics, right? So they want to build power and speed off of the line. So they're working more on strength and explosiveness. So it just depends on that.
So basically if somebody comes to you, it's like I'm training for Ironman, you would be like, okay, so let's analyze what we can do based on your schedule.
Somebody comes to me and they say, I want to do an Ironman. What do I do? CrossFit. I mean, that's as basic and as simple as it gets. Now, that's the introduction, and then we start dialing into their more of an individual program. But, CrossFit is set up for anybody and anybody to do anything with it, regardless if they're in a sport or not. So. Now,
when it comes to, I know you're a father.
Yes, sir.
You had 3 kids?
Yes, sir.
Right. So you're a father of 3 kids. So one thing, I work with health condition and health plans for parents, because I think like whenever you have a kid, it can be stressful and all that, and it's so easy to lose yourself after that. I lost myself for a while. But so what do you learn with CrossFit that you try to implement in your family? Is that anything that it like really brings that out with you, or like just something that you...
I think patience. CrossFit has really brought out patience in me. I still am pretty impatient.
I think every man is a little bit, right?
I think everybody is, right? But I've learned through CrossFit that that it takes a long time to get where you want to be, and then when you finally get to that point of where you want to be somewhere else. And so that's the journey that it takes me on. And then for parenting, it's taught me a lot of patience, knowing that parenting is a journey. It's not just now, it's later, and it's the future, and it's when they're older and when they're adults and when they're parents. So it's helped me be a good role model. It's helped me be able to deal with different situations that may in the past have stressed me out, but now through CrossFit, I've learned to kind of deal with my emotions a little bit better, deal with some more of that patience a little bit better, and have a better understanding of where people are coming from. I talk to so many different walks of life that come into this gym, and there's just so many different types of people that come into this gym from all over the world. And, their perspective on life is going to be a little bit different, but I've taken a little bit from everybody and tried to kind of roll that into my life. And some of it works and some of it doesn't. But, just like CrossFit, you're kind of continuously refining your parenting skills or you're continuing to refine your athletic abilities. Yeah. So, having 3 kids, I don't like when people use the excuse of, I just have kids now.
Yeah, I don't like that either.
And it's like, I kind of get that, but you're not a great parent. You're not a great you unless you're working on you. So I think that if you can't even give yourself, 60 minutes a day to work on you, you're probably missing out on the benefit of being a better parent and being a better spouse and being a better coworker and being a better boss and being a better manager. So I think, a lot of that comes from just giving yourself that time for you. Even though some people may seem that it's selfish, it's actually benefiting your family and it's benefiting your peers more than it is being selfish, in my opinion.
Well, I totally agree with that, because that's, and I actually wrote on my blog the other day that kids are often our reflection. Yes. And I noticed a tremendous difference in my son when I told my wife, like, we sat down and said, like, listen, we need to do something about it, because we can't be gaining weight and eating our stress away, because like, I have a special need kid, and which is the equivalent of having almost 4 kids, and the stress level is there. But I noticed that whenever I started taking care of myself, I saw a benefit on him, so I think it's very important, and you touch a very important subject. It's taking care of yourself will benefit you as a parent as well, and it's not being selfish.
Right. And so we have one of our athletes here. Her name is Sarah Baker, and she does a lot. She writes blogs, and a lot of her stuff is about being a healthy mom for a fit baby. And so she does a lot of the nutritional stuff, and she's always posting about, I used to work out for 2 or 3 hours at a time, and I thought that was going to benefit me. And then when I had kids, I barely have any time. It's a mindset, and it's a shift. But it doesn't mean that it's any less than what you were doing before. You just may not have to do it in a different manner this time.
Exactly, yeah.
Frequency might have to go down. Intensity might have to go up. Sessions may be shorter. Durations may be shorter than your 2 or 3 hour sessions, but it still can be accomplished. And I think that she writes some really good stories about that, and how her becoming a parent has really put the focus still on herself as a priority to be a better parent and spouse and coworker and all that other stuff, but allowing yourself to be a little bit more selfish. And maybe that's a little less time, or maybe you skip a workout when you normally didn't skip a workout. But you can't be beating yourself up all the time, because that guilt is just going to eat away at you, and it's going to get you back to where you first started again.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that.
We're on the same page.
Exactly.
We're on the same page.
Now, one thing that my father-in-law did with his family was they told the kids, and they had 3 kids. They've been triathletes for, like, I don't know, what the fuck ever, to be honest. Like, it's been like my brother-in-law has probably been on triathlon for 25 years or plus. Wow. My wife too. And his role was, you guys need to do a sport. I don't care what it is, but you need to do a sport. That being said, does your kids work out, or they're like, I don't want to do any of that? No.
So here's the thing, right? So my kids are super athletic. 2 out of the 3 kids play competitive sports.
Oh, really?
3 out of 3 kids play multiple sports. 0 out of 2 parents have forced them to do any of those sports.
Oh, nice. So just leading by example.
Just leading by example, and that's one of the best things about owning a CrossFit gym, is seeing my kids come in here, and as bored as they may be watching me coach and all that, they're still picking up things, and they're looking at people, and they're sponges, and they're absorbing it. So,
and they see people overcoming themselves.
Right,
I think
and
that's
they see people high-fiving and
yeah.
shaking, slapping asses, and doing all that fun stuff, and laughing and giggling after a workout. And they're like, these people just went through hell, and they're laughing and smiling and communicating afterwards. So just being an indirect role model to my kids, and just, my kids don't want to do it, they don't have to do it. Now that being said, if my kids sign up for a sport and halfway through the season they're like, I don't like this anymore, Dad. Well, you're still a team player.
You got to finish the season.
You got to finish the season and still be productive. And then at the end of the season, we reevaluate. But I'll never force my kids to play a sport. I'll never force my kids to CrossFit if they don't want to CrossFit. It's not fair, because I've seen a lot of people in the past where their parents have deemed them really athletic kids and they really drive them, and it's more of the parents' drive than it is the kids' drive. And I get a little bit of that, because when kids are young, they kind of need more of that direction. But I've also seen when those kids age, they have so much resentment towards the sport and or their parents for forcing them to do that. And then they start going the different route of having...
They go the opposite. They try to go on the healthy route, right?
Yeah,
Smoke
and... do drugs and alcohol, whatever that looks like, or maybe involved in other, addictions that aren't necessarily positive.
Yeah.
So for me, if my kids want to do it, I'll support them in doing it. If they don't, then, education. Probably. Education is going to be a big deal. And there is one thing, I don't force my kids to do athletics, but I did tell my kids that you are going to go to college. You have to try college at least once, and education's
just see if there is for them or not.
Education's a big deal for us, especially in this day and age. Even though college degrees may not seem that as important as they were 10 or 15 years ago, but I still think it's important to
knowledge
go through,
is power, anyways.
To go through those experiences and to go through struggle and to go through happy times and to go through bad times and be a little bit more independent. Let them go out on their own for a little while and realize that mom and dad weren't so wrong after all. Right?
Exactly.
Mom and dad's home wasn't such a bad place after all.
Exactly.
Right? So, that's just the way I've always parented. My parents really, when I was growing up, my parents divorced at a really young age, and I don't know I haven't talked to my biological father in 5 years or seen him, but it's my mom was a single mom essentially, and so she kind of let us do whatever we wanted to do. And I don't want that approach. I want my kids to have boundaries, and I want my kids
guidance,
but guide them with an open hand a little bit. Experience that on your own, and if it's something that's a negative experience for you, come back and we'll hopefully make it a positive experience.
I perfectly agree. And the funny thing is, when we got pregnant, we didn't know about his condition, and everything was a surprise for us. But everybody was saying like, "Oh, he's gonna be a maniac on triathlon." I was like, "Listen," because my wife was a triathlete as well, and she was pretty good. And I was like, "Listen, he's gonna be whatever the hell he wants to be." I most likely gonna teach him a few things here and there, but ultimately it's his. I don't want him to do triathlon just to impress me. And that's one thing I saw because I used to volunteer on kids triathlon every year, and that's what I saw sometimes. For me it was more the dad and the mom racing than actually the kid, and the kid was there 7 years old with the best equipment you could imagine. I was like, this kid needs to be having fun, yes, if it's his choice, but not, impose anything for, you need to be a triathlete or whatever. So,
when I first opened the gym, I had a lot of people coming up to me and say, man, it's got to be tough to be your kid, because I bet your kids work out all the time. I bet your kids only eat vegetables and fruits and lean meats. And I said, no.
They're still kids.
I said, they're kids, and they play and they go to the pool, and my kids eat hot dogs and Pop-Tarts and goldfish crackers and stuff. And I said, yeah, they do eat a lot of healthy food. That's just my wife and
the majority of
and so that's kind of what they're dealt with eating. But do they dislike it? No, not at all. But we never forced them to say, hey, you need to eat healthy, or hey, you need to do this sport. It was just kind of a learned adaptation over time, and they got to choose what they wanted to do, and they chose this route. So.
Well, to wrap it up, I have one question that is more a curiosity of mine than anything else, because I'm not into the world of CrossFit as much as you obviously are. But I know triathlon have a lot of drugs. I know running have a lot of drugs. I know jiu-jitsu have a lot of drugs. And then they have and the funny thing is, the crazy thing I believe is triathletes, even age group as amateurs, they are taking drugs now. So what is your perception of drugs inside of the CrossFit community?
Drugs in the CrossFit community, drugs in professional sports in general, like you just said, I think are going to be prevalent regardless. Some sports, the Lance Armstrong deal, right, the whole Tour de France thing, and him testing positive, and blood doping for years and then finally figuring it out. And what I learned from that situation was that he was doing it because everyone else was doing it, or even vice versa, right?
Yes,
and I'm not trying to persuade someone to like
Yeah,
or
yeah,
dislike
of
or whatever.
course.
It's just my opinion. But
I burned all his books, just so you know.
right, so for me, it's like I think sometimes people do it to keep up with other people doing it.
Yeah.
Now, when it relates to CrossFit, are there people in CrossFit using steroids? I'm sure there is. Proof. There's a couple people that tested positive just as of recently in the regionals and games.
But as of now, it's not something that like people's like this is like constantly. Because like for example, they did a survey that was anonymous in an Ironman in Europe, and 7 out of 10 age groupers assumed to be taking some sort of performance
I
enhancing
don't
drug.
want people to blend sports as far as like from a doping or performance enhancing standpoint,
Yeah.
because I think cycling endurance is a lot
It's
different
a lot
than
different,
CrossFit.
yes, yeah.
Then it's different than Olympic lifting, and is different from that. So as far as like drugs in CrossFit goes, I'm sure there's quite a bit, but I'm also not sure if there's that much. Based off of what I've seen, just research and not research, but all the tests that have come out, some have tested positive, some have lied about it, some have been caught, some have not been caught. So just like any other sport, do I think it's going to be prevalent? Yeah, it's going to be there all the time, regardless of the testing policies and all that. Now, do I think CrossFit has upscaled their testing and procedures now that people have been caught? Sure, and I think that's just them continuing to refine the anti-doping and the drug policies, and I think that goes for a lot of sports. They're starting to refine, as science gets better with people figuring out different drugs to use that aren't detectable, we need to figure out testing policies that will make those drugs show up on
the
those
difficulty
tests.
on testing is the doping science is way ahead of the anti-doping, which is pretty sad. But
right, for CrossFit, the benefit of being massive and having huge muscles is there's
not
a
much,
benefit
right?
to it, but it's not.
It's not as much,
bodybuilding. There is, because bodybuilding is about aesthetics.
Yeah.
Those guys are super strong, right? But they look like thoroughbred horses. Those guys are huge.
Yeah, CrossFit actually will be bad for you. You're almost gonna give you trouble than actually
you need
help
more
you.
oxygen for larger muscles, and let's look at all these CrossFitters. They're big people, and they're very muscular people.
But they're also mobile.
Right. They would benefit more from having a something that would help increase their endurance, something that would help increase their VO2 values, their VO2
like
maxes.
EPO and things like that.
Things like a blood doping, right?
Yeah.
That's what you saw with Lance Armstrong's and a lot of the cyclists. They were blood doping. They weren't using performance enhancing steroids to make them big and buff and strong, right? They were just using it more from a performance output. What was benefiting them at their sport. Same with CrossFitters. I feel like they would probably lean more towards like blood doping and HGH, something that helps with recovery, something that helps with the ligaments and tendons staying strong, and increasing their VO2 values versus using something that's going to break down their tendons, break down their ligaments, make them have huge muscles, which have more of an oxygen demand. So long story short, there's steroids in every sport. Yeah. Now, can I prove any of that? No.
Nobody can.
I've only been able to prove who've been tested positive and who've been busted. And those numbers in CrossFit have been really small. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, the reason I like to ask is I have a bunch of friends that started with me, and they got actually caught. But for a while, I was scratching my head of like what they're doing different, because they're putting 1 hour ahead of me. Right. And when they got caught, I was like, okay, I know now what they're doing different.
It's unfortunate for the athlete that doesn't do it. Because they always feel like no matter how hard I train, no matter the frequency, no matter the intensity, no matter the recovery methodologies that I have, I'm going cupping and acupuncture and massage twice a week and all that. And they're like, these guys are still whooping my ass. No. Yes, it's unfortunate for you, athlete A, who didn't do that. But unfortunately, a lot of other people are doing that, and they're just not getting busted yet.
Oh, if you read that, I don't know if you ever read that book, The Secret Race. That is the guy that talks about, he raced with Lance Armstrong, he talks about everything he was doing. And he actually have, I think it's 1,000 days that he say, usually you get into cycling, and in 1,000 days, you're either going to take drug or you're going to give up. Because you're going to get to that point like everybody's doing, no matter how hard I work and recover and all that, I'm not going to catch them. And it's either like I'm going to start doing or I'm not going to do it. And that's what happened with him. He came out clean, and he said like, yeah, I made it an option. everybody was taking, and I wanted to make a living out of this, and then I decided to take.
You know, the unfortunate part about performance-enhancing drugs is it's going to be prevalent in that person until they get caught.
Yeah.
And until they get caught, they're probably going to continue to use it because it
They will
benefits
make
what they're doing,
money.
and
They
they're
will
making
do
money, right?
exactly. Yeah.
And Lance Armstrong made and I don't want this to be about him, but he made a ton of money over those years. And he's out of the media
He
now.
still
He's
look
sitting-
like that guy.
Right,
you know?
he's sitting pretty, and that's fine if that's the way he wanted to do things. But as far
That's
as
his option too.
right,
There's nothing we
in
can do about it.
CrossFit, I don't see it happening as much as I would see it somewhere else. Like
Which
in
is a
the
good thing.
NFL, I don't. Those guys are massive too. I don't think those guys on steroids, they would benefit necessarily from being on steroids. So I don't know if a lot of those guys in the NFL would do it. Major League Baseball, I think a lot of those guys take steroids because power to hit the ball, because that's what people want to see.
Yeah.
And then recovery, because they play 162
Well,
games in a season.
You said a really good thing. It's like when people ask me like, well, but they take drugs. Like, listen, nobody wants to see a Tour de France that everybody's riding at 20 miles an hour, which you can do on the weekend. They
Right.
want to see them like killing themselves at 35 miles an hour, And in order to do that, you're gonna have to take some stuff,
At
at
all costs.
So it's
At all costs.
it's a lot of the times it's the public issue too, because nobody wants to see like, well, 24 miles an hour, I can ride at 24 miles an hour. Like they want to see something that they think is impossible being done.
Right.
So
Exactly. A feat of strength that nobody would
Exactly.
be able to do ever. And we want to see that.
Yeah.
And we'll do it at any cost. So
all right, man, thank you very much for this conversation. It was a pleasure to be talking to you.
Yeah.
And if you guys are from Broomfield, Colorado, or Denver metro area, stop by CrossFit Perfectus.
Come on down,
and
baby.
if you're from outside also and you come here,
come on down.
look it up, because that's the best coaching you're gonna get from CrossFit.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, man.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.